Hello! I'm going to start another project today, and it's something I've been meaning to do for a while, and that is to create a large book of swatches. Now, I've been swatching for years, and I have all sorts of pieces of paper that are just pretty much all over the place. I've wrangled them into some folders, but they're not in order. It's entirely too hot to be dealing with these right now, but I thought it would be good to work my way through my collection of watercolours and gouache and all sorts of other kinds of art supplies and put them into a book where they're all together and I can't lose them so easily. I have a big book ready to go, so let's get into it! Now, this sketch pad or book that I've chosen, and it's a chunky boy, is by a company called Paper House. I think it's Australian, but there really isn't that much information out there. I bought this in a local shop called Spotlight. It has 50 sheets of watercolour paper in 300 GSM. It's not cotton, it's just a wood cellulose paper, but since it's for swatching, it's not that big of a deal. I also know that the paper is good because I'd bought a smaller pad of it in an A5 size a few years ago. I haven't done much in it, but I've sketched about with some watercolours and it holds paint really well, so I know I like it, and colours are nice and vibrant on it. You can see I've swatched in this pad before and it's upside down. I've had this at least since 2022 and I've just been using it to test out supplies really. I haven't done a lot of paintings, although I did one and you can see the watercolours holding up pretty well on there. Otherwise I just have some random abstract scribbles and it's just a good way to test out some art supplies on some paper that I wasn't too fussed about whether I make a big mess or not. But this is what got me thinking about getting another book which I can dedicate entirely to swatches, and I have another page that's upside down. I don't know how I managed that, but I figured because I've made enough mess in this book, I'm just going to start with a fresh one. You can see it also has perforated pages, which is really great, and I decided to go for an A4 size because I can fit more swatches on a page. They also have an A3 size that has half of the amount of pages, whereas the A5 and A4 are both 50 pages each. That A5 pad I just showed now is also brand new. It's the second one because I couldn't decide if I wanted the larger or smaller. All of the pads were on sale, so I just bought them both and then I can decide later, and I'm definitely going with the A4. Now, I don't want to have to rule all the swatch boxes, so I have these stamps which are by the company Waffle Flower. It's an American company and they cost me heaps to get over here, but they're really good for swatching. I've got this Ranger Archival ink. It is waterproof in jet black, and we need waterproof ink so I can paint over it later. I will list everything in the description below so you can find these products. I have a feeling this particular pad of paper is going to be really difficult to find overseas. I don't know if it's available, but look what I've gone and found on Amazon now. There's one by Lightwish with all of the swatches pre-stamped in there, and there's a second brand, and I think these ones might be American, HG Art Concepts. They are Painter's Colour Diaries in 100% cotton, 9x12 or 2 packs, actually not too bad. There's also a slightly smaller version. I'm kicking myself I didn't find these first. Let me know if you've tried them out. Are they any good? But since I've already bought my books, I'm just going to keep going with my project. And I was looking at the front cover. It's incredibly flimsy paper, so I think I really need to fix this up first and make it look like a nicer swatch book. I dug about in my paper craft supplies and I found this pad of scrapbook paper which has a stripy colour design in here if I can find it. There it is. I thought this would be ideal for the cover. It's a simple design but it's got that swatchy look to it, so it's pretty much perfect and it's just the right size to fit on here. Plus it's fairly thick, so adding that to the cover should make it nice and sturdy. I basically just stuck it on with some double-sided tape rather than using glue because I thought glue might warp the paper and make it look a bit yucky, whereas double-sided tape doesn't do that. I'm just slapping it down there just to make sure that the paper sticks on nice and thoroughly. I'm just peeling off all of the paper here to expose the sticky part of the tape, and then the scary part, lining it up and not getting the paper stuck until I'm good and ready, because once the stuff adheres to the sticky tape, it does not come off again. I'd trimmed down the piece of paper beforehand just to make it a bit easier. I had a little bit just overhanging, so I decided just to trim that off rather than folding it around because there wasn't much left over, and I would have made an even bigger mess. But that's looking better already, and it's just made the cover so much sturdier. And prettier too. I felt like I wanted to write something on the front cover though, not just leave it plain like this, so I've pulled out my trusty zipper case of stencils and I'm rummaging around looking for the letters that I might want to use. And I decided to go with this letter design. I did a little bit of measuring to try and figure out where the central part of the paper is, and my words can be centered rather than being off to one side because I'm really good at doing that. I think I did pretty well, and I'm just drawing the lines on it using a pencil. I figured this would be the safer option rather than using pen straight away because I'm bound to make a mistake somewhere, and sure enough I did. On this next line I didn't really measure, and so I just kind of guessed where the letters should go and I stuffed it up. You'll see me in a moment realizing this because I'd counted Swatch as 5 letters when it's actually 6, and you can see me counting there. This meant my letters were going to be off-center and I would have more on the right than the left. Now, I know this doesn't really matter, but it's just annoying visually every time I look at it. So I persevered for the rest of it, and then I just decided, no, I need to rub it out and start again. Luckily, I'd only drawn lightly on there with the pencil, so all of the marks came off easily, and I redid it. I'm very glad I did, because it looks nice and centered now. 6 letters in Swatch, Becky, not 5. Honestly, you could save yourself so much time if you just bought the Swatch books off Amazon. Although I think when I was calculating later the number of swatches I can fit in this book versus the ones online, I think it works out cheaper that I've got this particular book because it has 50 pages or 100 sides, and I can fit 24 of those waffle flower swatches on each page, for a total of 2,400 swatches, which is quite a lot. I'm using a Kmart paint pen here just to start colouring them in. This was taking ages, so I decided just to outline everything first and then I'll come back to colouring them all in. I actually did the colouring part off camera because it took forever. This is usually the way when I start a project, that it always ends up taking longer than I'm anticipating. And that's usually because I like to make things look pretty, so I do spend that extra time making some sort of decoration for the cover. Of course, my letters are a lot more wobbly now because I'm free-handing them, trying to trace over the lines I've drawn, but making a few little mistakes. I had a wobbly hand this day and it's showing a little bit. Doesn't matter too much. Once I colour it in, it doesn't show. So I've just made the lettering pretty simple. It's called Becky's Swatch Book, to go with Becky's sketchbook and Becky's little sketchbook if you've been watching my videos so far this year. But I'm finally finishing the outlining here, and boom! Here's my finished cover page. I really like how it's turned out. That scrapbooking paper was perfect for this. So I guess now I should probably swatch something in here. But first of all, I've got to get the stamp going, and I've opted for the 3-lined stamp. This gives me space for mass tone at the top, diluting out in the middle part, and then I can write the name of the paints and also the pigment numbers in the 3rd quadrant. Or is it a 3rdrant? And yes, it was impossible for me to line these up perfectly, so you can see they're all a little bit wonky. Part of it is because I was filming and had to have the paper a bit further away from my face, whereas if I was leaning up close I might have been able to get slightly neater lines of boxes. Oh dear, it's a little bit wobbly, never mind. I did stamp a couple more pages off camera and it was a bit easier because I could look up closely. Do you think I could get the page open though? Here we go. Those are looking a little bit neater. It's not perfect, but as far as I'm concerned it's good enough. I'll be able to get some decent swatches on here. Because I've prepared 3 pages, I'm going to swatch out 3 different tins of watercolours. All of these are by Paul Rubens. I have the 4th generation standard set here, which is the first ones that I ever owned by them. The swatch card has the names but not the pigment numbers. I also have the 5th generation watercolours in that stripy box, and I have the floral set, which I think is the latest one that they have in this plain pink tin, and this set has quite a few different colours compared to the others. The original swatch card that they sent with it is in a really annoying order. I had to swap them around because that nickel yellow is just completely in the wrong place. It took me ages to find the second swatch card that I'd made. After rewatching the video, I remembered it was in the Lightwish sketchbook that also came with the set, and I'd put it in there. So you can see what I mean, that it's just really frustrating having all of these swatch cards just in random places in my studio. I've written written out all of the pigment names and numbers just so I didn't have to do that on camera. And if you remember, I didn't have the pigment numbers on the 4th generation set, and that's because they were sent to me as a set of tubes in this box. So all of the pigment numbers are written on the tubes, but I was thinking I really didn't want to have to sit here copying the names from the tubes because it's such a fiddly process. I remembered I'd done it in another sketchbook though. This is one of my older sketchbooks that I completed a few years ago, and thankfully I had written the pigment numbers in here along with the names, so it was so much easier to copy those straight into this swatch book. Oh my lord, I'm so confused already, and I haven't even gotten to all of my other watercolour sets, but the Paul Rubens were giving me quite a trying time just on their own. So I'm going to swatch all 3 sets, and you can see how my new swatch book is going to go. This first page is the Paul Rubens Floral Watercolour set, because this is 24 colours in the tin. That's the other reason I decided to swatch these on camera, because all 3 sets have 24 half pans in them, and that's just so much easier for me to film on camera. A lot of my other sets have more than 24 pans, and I am going to have to use multiple pages to swatch them if I use this particular stamp. But you can see how it's working quite well. I've got that black line in the middle, which is also really useful just to see if paints are transparent or opaque, and I'm letting the paints run because I put plain water on first and then paint over the top, trying to keep the mass tone at the top, but I like to just drag it down as well. So everyone has their own techniques with how they like to swatch their paints. Some people like to put salt on their watercolours. I am just far too lazy for that. I don't really care because I don't use salt in my paintings anyway, or at least I haven't bothered to try. Maybe I should try, and I will find a new technique that I like. I'm just swatching these quickly because I do have full videos on all 3 sets in my video collection, which you can check out if you want to hear more about the information on these paints. Hopefully you can see the colour names and the pigment numbers easily enough on your screen here too. So this is interesting. I'm painting out the 4th generation watercolours first because I'd never actually done a direct comparison between the 4th and 5th generations. They are exactly the same colours and the same pigments for both sets. So I was wondering, is there any actual difference between the 4th and the 5th generations? I don't know why I haven't tested this before. That would have been really good to know. I guess that's because they'd sent me the paints to review, and I generally just want to focus on the set that I'm using for that day rather than comparing multiple sets together. So I hope you don't mind me doing this now. And after swatching them out again, I do prefer the overall palette of the 4th or 5th generation watercolour set compared to the floral set, although the florals do have a couple of interesting colours in there that are really pretty. But if I was to choose one set, I would go for this colour palette over the floral one. I think this one's more useful, and all of the colours are really great, whereas the floral set has a couple of dodgy ones in there. I'll show that in a little bit, but it's definitely nowhere near as solid a set as this particular one is. This one's so handy to have. And I think it has a really nice range of colours. Cobalt Turquoise Dark is probably my favourite. Here is the 5th generation set of watercolours, as I said, all identical pigments and pigment numbers. But I did notice that these ones do flow a little bit more in water than the 4th generation. It's like they've added ox gall or something to the binder to make those paints run more easily. I'm just purely guessing on this, but that's what it seemed to me. I also think that the 5th generation is slightly more saturated in pigment than the 4th generation, particularly with the red colours. They seemed a lot more vibrant, but a lot of the others, there are only subtle differences. And really, if you've got the 4th generation tubes, you probably don't need to get the 5th generation half pan set, unless you just want to have the half pans as well. But I think if I ran out of any colours in this 5th generation set, I'd just squeeze in some of the 4th gen paint to top up a colour, because they're close enough to each other that it really doesn't make that much difference. I love that Cobalt Turquoise Dark. That's such a pretty and granulating pigment. It's a really good one. The paper in this sketchbook held up well to a lot of water washing on here and paint, so I'm very happy with it, even though it's not one of the ready-made ones you can buy online. I don't mind that I made this project up. It makes mine very individual. So I'll come back in a moment and show you all the swatches as they're dried. They look very nice and vibrant on this paper. You can see there's a little bit of cauliflowering, and that's because the paper is not cotton, but that's not really a deal breaker for me. I was trying to decide if I could see any differences between the two sets of colours. The only one that stands out to me is that French blue. They look quite different when they are dry, but otherwise they all pretty much look the same. Maybe Cobalt Turquoise Dark is a bit more pigmented than the 4th generation one. Berlin Blue also looks more saturated on the 5th gen side, but honestly that could just be me putting more paint on one side than the other, who would know? And flipping back over to the first page, here is the floral set. Can you see what I mean about it being a weaker palette? I really don't like those 3 browns together, and Yellow Sienna Deep, even though it's a PY42 the same as this colour, they are so different to each other, and Yellow Sienna Deep is much weaker than the Earth Yellow in the other set. It's really weird, so I definitely prefer the original set of colours over the floral palette. Although having said that, I love Peach Light and Lavender together, plus the Turquoise Light. Those 3 are a very pretty trio. But that's my little swatch project started, and I'm really happy with how it's looking so far. I do want to put a lot more swatches in here over time. I was thinking of doing this off camera, but if you want to see videos of me swatching out more of my collection, please let me know in the comments. And should I turn the A5 book into a smaller swatch book for the smaller sets that I have? There's so many pieces of paper in here, this is a big project. But I do love swatching, it's a very relaxing activity to do. And thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed seeing this. And do you have your own book of swatches? I think it's worth doing if you've got a big collection of colours. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up, and give that subscribe button a click if you want to see more videos in the future. Here's a couple of other ones to watch in the meantime, and I'll see you all again really soon in my next video. Have a great day out there, and I'll swatch you later. Bye!